Hey guys, I'm back here with another video for FAR1. So this is kind of to go along with the intro video. Here I'm just going to go ahead and go through a few tips for the class, just in case anybody was wondering, since this is your first real accounting class after the intro classes. I know it's kind of intimidating, it's definitely a challenging class, and when I was at UF, people definitely had questions about this when I was a TA there, so I thought I would just share some insights really quickly, just give some people an idea of what to expect and maybe calm some nerves. So basically, the first thing people kind of wonder about is how much time they should be spending on the class. Generally speaking, I would say that you should be spending at minimum 10 to 15 hours a week, and that's a minimum, right? So if you're spending less than that, you're probably not going to do that well, just because there's a lot of stuff to be doing, requires a lot of effort. If you really are shooting for an A, you probably want to be doing more than 15 hours a week, but that's basically what I would recommend for time. A couple other things in terms of what you should be doing. So definitely read before class, and I know that every professor that you've had has told you that, and a lot of people don't necessarily do that, but it is a big difference if you actually read before class, because then you know what's going on and you can ask intelligent questions or say, oh, okay, like, I read this in the book and it didn't fully make sense to me. That's the way I did it. It didn't fully make sense to me, but then when the professor said something, it kind of clicked for me. So that's the way I use that. And then the other thing I would do is, before you've started a specific chapter, so if you're on chapter 2 or 3 or whatever, there's going to be homework problems associated with that chapter. I would definitely go ahead and start working those before the first day you cover the chapter. So generally what's going to happen is that for FAR1, most of the chapters are how you have 2 days to cover each chapter, so it's about a week per chapter. So by that first day, I would definitely have read the chapter at least once and then started the homework problems. That way you can get a good start on the chapter and figure out where you have questions. Next, I would make sure that, so the other thing is, so you have 2 days per chapter. So by the end of that second day, I would try to set your schedule up to where you're basically done working all the assigned homework problems and reading the chapter at least one time by the end of that second day of class. That way you'll have plenty of time at the end before the exam. You'll have hopefully about a week or so, or at least a few days to review, because you're going to need that time. Because in this class, what you kind of need to do is work as you go along, and then you want to have time at the end to review everything, because there is so much material and you'll need to fine tune everything so that way you'll remember it for the exam. Another point is, when you're actually doing the problems, this is basically like the key to success in this class and all the accounting classes, definitely FAR1, FAR2, is you're going to be given all these homework assignments to do on your own time, and especially from the book. So you're going to be provided with the solutions. And there's definitely a temptation whenever you get stuck to just really quickly look at the solution and go, oh, okay, yeah, like that's obvious, I would have done that. But really the key to success is to struggle through the problem for at least 15, 20 minutes, kind of sit with it, think about, okay, like what could I do here? And really sort of almost force yourself to get the answer. If you can't get it and you've struggled through it for a decent amount of time, then sure, go ahead and look at the solution. But if you do look at the solutions without actually solving it yourself, make sure that you completely understand what they did and you could explain it to somebody else. That's always a good standard to have, right? Like if you can teach somebody else the material and they understand it, you're probably good to go for the exam. And going along with that is, you really need to understand the material in this class. You cannot just memorize. If you're just memorizing in this class, and definitely for FAR2, it's only going to get you so far, right? You're just not necessarily going to have the success that you want to have in these classes, and it's going to be a lot more painful even as you go along, because you have advanced accounting and you have other classes after FAR1 and FAR2 that they keep building up, and the professors expect that you've learned the material in FAR1 and FAR2 and that you still kind of retain it. And then another thing is, after you've worked a problem, one way to test your understanding is to kind of switch it around, or say like, oh, what if they asked this instead, or what if they asked this instead? I'm sure you guys know that, but just as a reminder. And then just in terms of getting a better grade, this is a little bit of a cynical point, but it is true. At the Fisher School, classes are graded on a curve. And so if a lot of students at the beginning are slacking off and not doing well, if you're working really hard at the beginning, then that means that you can get a higher score relative to them, which means that you can almost guarantee yourself a higher grade. Just kind of maybe a little cynical, but it is practical and it is true. And finally, a couple last points, and then I'll just go through a couple of psychological things to help people's ease their nerves a little bit more. Finally, last two things, go see the TA for fall of 2018. It should be a guy named Austin Herzberg. He's a really good guy, super nice, works really hard, knows the material very well, and really wants to help students. He was one of my students about a year ago, and so he was very good in FAR1. And then obviously go see the professors, like get to know them and get some of their insights, not only on the classes, but on other stuff as well. Most of the professors really do, pretty much all the professors really do like to see students and really like to help them out. And then finally, just a couple of, not necessarily accounting related things, but more psychological things. Don't get too discouraged, right? This class is very challenging. I'm sure you've heard that. And basically when I took the class, however many years ago now, 3-4 years ago, even I was like, man, I don't even know if I can do this. And, I graduated top of the class, right? And so even people that do really well can struggle early on, and you can still end up doing very well in the Fisher School program. So don't get too discouraged. It is a challenging class. If you are struggling, obviously reach out, like I said, to the TA or to the professor. Additionally, in terms of the exam, right, obviously don't psych yourself out. I remember when I was in school, people would stand outside the exam room and they would just basically say they're going to fail, which was always weird to me because it just seemed like, why are you going to say that before an exam? It just doesn't make too much sense. You want to have confidence, obviously, and you're going to have confidence if you've worked hard, right? And so what I used to always think is generally the professors give you plenty of time to finish the exam as long as you're working at a good pace. And so generally, one thing that used to calm me down is, okay, even if I waste the first 5 or 10 minutes of the exam doing nothing, I still can probably do well in this exam. And the reason that used to calm me down was because I could kind of have jitters, and I definitely did on certain exams, but I could say, okay, just calm down, you got plenty of time. And what I would do is just say, okay, let me just find 1 or 2 that I can do well, and I know I can do them, and then I can just build momentum. And as soon as I got those first 2 done, 1 or 2 done, I'd be like, boom, 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 and got them all done, okay? And that's the way I think to approach everything in life, is kind of take it piecemeal and say, all right, 1 question at a time with respect to the exam, and then as opposed to thinking of it as this whole, right? Because it seems like you almost can't do it, but if you think about it in separate pieces, you can say, okay, question 1, question 2, question 3, and keep moving, right? So I hope those tips and tricks and suggestions, whatever you want to call them, were helpful, and good luck this semester, and I hope you guys have a good time at the Fisher School of Accounting. Good luck.